As an educational professional, you need to be making data-based decisions for your classes. We use that term in education so much that it's basically become a cliche. And it's critically important that we make data-based decisions for our classes, for our students. And in this video, I'm going to take a deep dive into how I do that for my classes. I promise you, this is going to be one of the most important videos you ever watch. You should know your data better than any other person on the planet. That includes administration, it includes your students, everybody. You should know your data better than any other person. And I'm going to give you some examples of that later on in this video. It allows you to measure success. It allows you to determine where your students need improvement. It allows you to determine where you need improvement, where you need to grow as a professional. So data is just an absolutely critical tool to growth and being a professional in this industry. It also is critically important if you want to get grants. Whenever you earn a grant, you need to be able to demonstrate learning gains and demonstrate to the group funding you that you are meeting the learning objectives that they issued you the money for. Same thing with applying for awards. If you want to apply for some awards, Teacher of the Year, anything like that, you need to have data to be able to demonstrate that you're actually getting the job done in the classroom. So I'm going to take you on a very, very deep dive, and I promise you this is worth your time. At the end of it, I'm going to share some data points that you can incorporate into your classroom. Let's get to it. You should know your statistics better than any other person on the planet. You should know them better than admin. You should know them better than the school district. You should know your statistics. Here's some statistics that I quote right off the cuff when I'm talking to parents and students. Number one, with my AP Environmental Science class with AP pass rate. One year I was looking at some of the data. This is a snapshot from one year. And during that year, students who had 5 absences or less had a 100% pass rate. Students with 6 to 19 absences were right at the national average, which is usually around 50%. And students missing 20 days or more had a 25% pass rate. No statistical manipulation, no nothing. I was actually surprised I had students who only missed 5 days. I actually had two of them. They both scored fours. So I tell parents and students all the time that it's critical that they attend class. And this gives me absolute proof of that. Another statistic I quote when I'm talking to people and recruiting students for the Envirothon is that my Envirothon pass rate is 83.33%. So those students participating in the Envirothon do very, very well in the AP Environmental Science exam. And I try to incorporate some of those activities into the classroom because of that great pass rate. Now, here's another statistic for you. Those of my students who've won state championships have a 100% pass rate. Go figure. All right. Here's another statistic that I love to share in the fourth quarter. Once we start reviewing for the AP Environmental Science exam, it's critical that the students do the review that I ask them to complete. So I asked them to do a lot of things that fourth 9 weeks. And obviously, one of the things I have them do is they complete practice tests. After they've completed 3 or 4 practice tests, I know who my 2, 3 borderline people are. Those people that are consistently scoring 2s or 3s. Then I tell them, look, if you complete this review packet and this review test, and you complete all of the practice FRQs that I'm going to give you access to, 80% of those of you who are 2, 3 borderlines will actually accomplish a 3 or better. And again, that's another snapshot from one year. Same thing with the 83.3% Envirothon. These aren't career-long statistics because the career goes 27 years and I don't want to crunch that much data. These are snapshots. Here's another interesting statistic that I used to love to quote is for years, actually decades, my sophomores had a 100% pass rate. Now, that makes some sense because they're not involved with all the senior activities. They're focused. They're just focused on getting to their junior year. They're not distracted. They're also probably enrolled in chemistry and algebra, or algebra 2. So it makes sense that they would have a 100% pass rate. Now, that I don't think that's true anymore. I think I've had a couple of sophomores who broke my traditional streak. But again, it's a number. I tell them that it used to be intact, and we need to get back intact with it. And this year, I'm looking forward to. We've incorporated Ducks Unlimited into my AP Environmental Science curriculum and my ecology curriculum. And I want to see the students who did everything that I asked them to complete on Ducks Unlimited. How do they perform on the AP Environmental Science exam? It's going to be fascinating to take a look at that piece of data. Again, as I said, I am a complete data geek, and I'm looking forward to crunching that data sometime this summer. All right, how do you judge success? Use benchmarks. So, do you judge success with improvement? Is it growth? Is it comparison to other schools? Is it comparison to benchmarks like school averages, district averages, state averages, national averages, international averages? There's a whole host of different things you can focus on as far as what success looks like. So you have to decide ahead of time what success looks like, or sometimes when you crunch data, you may find some successes you hadn't even thought about. When you look at something macro like a school, um, figure out where you can chip in and help out. Things like reading and math. A lot of times when we look at reading and math data, we focus on those teachers that are in English and math teachers, but really it's on all of us. I purposely try to incorporate reading and math wherever possible in my curriculum. So the focus is on those teachers that are in that particular discipline, but really it falls upon all of us to help push the school to achieve those results that we want them to achieve. Now, I refer to macro and micro statistics. Macro are those things that are large, things like at a minimum a school average, a district average, a state average. And micro are those things that are occurring in your classroom. It could be your entire class, it could be a particular student. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those as we continue. But moral of the story is this, is that as far as focusing on micro statistics, focus on your classroom. As far as macro goes, figure out things you can do to help your school hit the goals that they've set for themselves. Wherever possible, incorporate things like math and English into your curriculum to help out and be part of the team. I mentioned year one, the very first year I taught, that we received $15,000 of funding to build my environmental science program at Winter Springs High School. And I knew at that moment that I needed to create a baseline of data and also knew I needed to perform. I needed to be able to demonstrate learning gains to be funded for year two and year three. And we were able to achieve that. I'm going to show you some interesting statistics in a second. But here's what I looked at. I took a look at GPA. I took a look at math scores. I took a look at reading scores, writing scores, attendance, graduation rate. So I want to take a look at all those things and find out where we had some wins. The other thing I did is I broke it down by total number of students and then at-risk students because my program was particularly focused on at-risk youth. So let's take a look at some of the things. All right, so the big win here was GPA. 1997, the GPA of my at-risk kids was 1.26. The GPA of my at-risk kids year two was 1.84, and then year three, the average was 2.09. So three of the four kids that were in that particular class were no longer at risk, which is a huge win. That was our goal. Some of the other things we did is we took a baseline data of 2.95 GPA, FCAT score of 324, FCAT reading score of 312, and took a look at those. 98, the GPA dropped a little bit to 2.86. We had wins in math and reading, slight wins, but wins nonetheless. And we had our initial score of a 3.83 on the Florida Rights. And then look in year three, our GPA is now at 3.15. Now here's some other statistics that I found that were big wins. I wasn't even looking for this, but I took attendance just for, again, to take a look at it and see what was happening. Our students attended 2 more days of school than the average student at Winter Springs High School, and we had a 0.34 higher GPA than the rest of the campus. So um, these basically demonstrated that we were achieving and accomplishing the goals that we'd set out for ourselves. And again, I was funded for year 2 and year 3. So I took a look at what's working, what strategies can be incorporated into the things where we're not being successful. Again, it dropped from 2.95 to 2.86. Wanted to take a look at that and figure out what we can do to get that up. And then we ended up with a 3.15. And that, again, we had small wins. One of the things I did is I incorporated case studies to help out with the reading, and I incorporated math activities to help out with the math. This gave me multiple opportunities to win in multiple areas so that I had some things I could focus on to show where we were having success. Again, it was good for the students because we were incorporating multiple subjects, but also gave me an increased chance of winning some areas where we could focus on so we could get refunded. And I broke it down by at risk and on pace. And you can see the at risk was a huge win, and I knew that was a particular focus of the grant. So the moral of the story is this, is take a look at your data, record as much baseline data as you can, identify what things that you end up winning and what things that you don't, and then the areas where you need improvement, focus on correcting those. All right, we just got done looking at the numbers from my Environmental Tech 1, Environmental Tech 2, and Water Quality Testing CTE program that I built. Now let's take a look at some advanced placement environmental science numbers. And one thing that College Board does that's wonderful is they provide you with all sorts of statistics. So this is the statistics come from them, and then the interpretation comes from me. One of the things I always do is plot what my scores are, and then figure out what we're going to do from there. So this is really, really interesting. My first year of teaching AP was 2001 right here, and I ended up finishing #1 in the county. And again, I think with that came a little bit of complacency and maybe a little bit of cockiness. And so I'm sitting there at #1, and then the following year, when I'm tutoring the students, I was, how do you say, I think the best way to put it is when they would come in, I would just take some of the tests and kind of go over the questions with them and kind of spoon feeding them the answers. That combined with, we've gone from 30 kids to 90 kids, and you can see what happened to the pass rate. After that, I took a look at it and I was like, you know what? No more spoon feeding kids when they come into for tutoring. We're going to be serious about it, and I'm never going over the answers with them before a test. They're going to have to, they're not going to know what's on the test and have to prepare for everything. And then you can see over here, we got back to #1 in the county the following 2 years. So we went from #1 to not my best year to #1 to #1. And I knew exactly what needed to be done. The other piece of data here, again, this isn't entirely on me, is I looked at the attendance of these students and I looked at the attendance of this year. And this is where I came up with that the statistic I shared with you about those students who miss 5 days or less, 100% pass rate, 6 to 19 days, 50% pass rate, 20 days or more, 25% pass rate. That came from analyzing this data right here. So it was a combination of student attendance and me being, I guess, it's no other way to say it, but a little overconfident about my ability to tutor after school. So, and then we got there. I was promoted to assistant principal, so there's no data over here. Now, at the same time, and I'm going to highlight this, Seminole High School, where I am now, this was their pass rate at the same time. So this is the starting point when I took over at Seminole High School. Um, and so I went from an A-B school here. They had A's, I think, 4 of the 6 years I was there, to a CD school, Title I school that needed a lot of help. And so when I took over, the pass rate was 11%. I'd gone from 58% to a place where we had 11%. Well, um, so I knew I had my work cut out for me. When I got there, they had 49 students with an 11% pass rate. We were able to increase that here. We increased it again. We increased it again. And when we got here, we had now basically quadrupled the pass rates and I guess more like tripled the pass rate and quadrupled the enrollment. So, um, and then the following year, we fell off. There was a fall off, and I spent years trying to figure out what this fall off was. And then last night, when I was taking a look at this data and preparing this presentation, I came across a realization. That was the year my father died. So my father died, and I was not as focused as I probably could have been. We got back on track, and look what happens. At this point, one of our assistant principals focused on making sure that we implement strong prereqs. The main reason being is that pass rate for AP classes was now part of the school grade for the state. Look what happens when you implement the prereqs. We got all the way up here, we're crushing it. Then the state decides, you know what? The pass rate is not as important anymore as giving students the opportunity. And look what happens. We enroll everybody. We drop the prereqs. We enroll everybody, and we kind of flounder around in this area right here. Now, one of the things that you need to know is that whenever I have a new principal, I always meet with the new principal the first few weeks and tell them, I can give you pass rate or number of students participating and getting the college experience. Combining the two, the more people you enroll that are not meeting prereqs, obviously, the more it impacts the pass rate. And some of my principals have said, I want pass rate. Other principals have said, I want the college experience. Fortunately, I tend to lean in the favor of those people who want the college experience, and most of my principals have been that way. So I've been very fortunate. Now, here's a couple of data points. When I talk about macro issues you have no control over, and this was irritating, is I'm super competitive. I want to be up here regardless of who the students are, how many I have. And on this particular year, they set it up so that prom was the Sunday before my exam, Monday morning at 8 a.m. So we have a tradition at our school, and that plays into this right here, of a thing called Senior Week, where the seniors all week they have activities going on. They've got a senior picnic, they've got awards, they've got senior breakfast, they've got a whole host of different things going on for a whole week where they're distracted. Well, in this particular year, they had Senior Week and then prom, and then boom, 8 a.m. Monday morning after I've not seen some of them for 9 days, the AP exam. So I knew that was going to be a rough one. This one over here, kind of the same thing, which is fortunately the AP exam was Thursday. It wasn't on Monday, but same thing. They have Senior Week, prom, and then AP testing begins, in which those of you who've taught AP, you don't see your students on a regular basis because they're usually excused from school for the testing. So this one was another situation like that. So I went to admin and said, hey, look, we can't keep doing this where you're having Senior Week either the week before my exam or 2 weeks before my exam, and we certainly can't have prom the day before the exam. And one of the assistant principals said, "Do you know how hard it is to find a hotel for prom?" I'm like, "I don't know, but I know that you're impacting pass rate." Well, we made the adjustments and boom, we're back up here. And this was actually during COVID. So I had in-person learning and we got back up to where I want to be. And then you see this over here. We had hybrid learning. Clearly, I'm not the greatest hybrid teacher in the world. So hybrid learning, I did not do as well. And then when we return to school, we get back to where I want to be. This particular year, I'm very, very proud of, which was last year, which was, as far as College Board goes, a 3 or higher is considered passing. It's called qualified. A 2 is possibly qualified. I believe that's the term they use, is possibly qualified. And 88% of our students scored 2s or better. There were not very many 1s. So that's my new focus. That is an area I think we can continue to improve on. If I can get my 2s up to 3s, and that's usually a few questions. What can I do to move this group of 2s up to 3s? And I'm taking a look at it. We've incorporated Ducks Unlimited. I've got some flashcard techniques I'm using. So I've got a number of things where I'm taking a look at the things I can control. This particular year right here, I think we can build on it, and I think we can get all of those 2s up to 3s. Over here, that's on me. My father died. I was not as focused as I should be. Um, and so I take a look and I figure out what's on me, what can I do to improve, and what are some of the macro issues that are out of my control, like putting prom literally the day before or 2 days before my AP exam. But the other thing to take away from this, and this is kind of interesting, is looking at an A school, an A-B school versus a CD school, and the students you have. So again, it's that's a little bit of a macro issue. I'm not afraid of it. I'm glad that I had that opportunity, and I love where I'm at right now. So we will continue to move this up and compete with those A and B schools and get our school to an A or B. All right, I talked a little while ago about how do you judge success, and usually it's with benchmarks. So I meet with the new principal when we have a new principal, and I tell them I can give you, with our particular school, I can give you 30 to 35% pass rate if you want to open it up to everybody and not worry about prerequisites. And so here are my benchmarks, which is every year my goal is 30 to 35%, unless a principal tells me otherwise. And sometimes we exceed that, sometimes we don't, but I can usually put us right in that area. Now, when I was at the A school I mentioned, you can see we significantly outperformed that. For this particular test, the national average is usually right around 50%. So that's a good benchmark. Anytime that you're beating the national average, you're doing particularly well, especially the fact that we have a Title I school. We're in a Title I school here. We've taken it from, again, remember our starting point. We started out at 11%. And this year, we just finished over 50%, and we beat the state average for this particular test. So again, if you look from where we started to where we are, it's been a little bit of a bumpy ride, and I've explained a lot of reasons for that. But you can see we're getting to where we need to be, and I'm super excited about taking a look at this piece of data right here, which is seeing if we can actually get to like an absurd 88% pass rate by implementing a few new techniques this year. So I always get a couple haters on my site when they see a 50% pass rate. That may not seem awesome, but in this particular case, it's pretty good. So when we start talking about this right here, where we're supposed to be, we're competing against non-Title I schools and doing very well. All right, Kris, I've endured you long enough. You promised me there was something in it for me. Here we go. So I would collect the following baseline data. I would collect your math scores, your reading scores, your writing scores, any subject specific scores that are applicable, GPA if applicable, graduation rate if applicable, attendance. I keep track of all this stuff. Number of students performing at grade level, number of students back on track, just in case you don't know. The definition of an at-risk student is a student who is behind in either credits or GPA, somebody who's not on path to graduate or promote with their grade. So I would collect baseline data of all of the following points. And then if you need it for any of the following things, if you want it for applying for a grant, you have baseline data. If you want it for applying for an award, you have baseline data. And most importantly, if you want to take a look and determine where you need to improve and what you can do to get better results with your students, you have baseline data. And then you can compare it to the data from the following year. You can get this data from ACT, SAT, AP. For those of you who are not in high school, you can get it from standardized tests. Look at the most recent state test for your particular grade level and subject. And you want to know this is where you really want to know your statistics, is you want to know what impact specific activities have on performance. For me, the statistics I really like to look at are one, attendance. We talked about it. 5 days or less, 100% pass rate. 6 to 19 days, state average and national average pass rate. 20 days or more, 25% pass rate. So that's a statistic I share with students so that they can focus on it themselves, and I share it with the parents as well. I also share that 83.3% pass rate for Envirothon. So I want students to participate in that. And also, again, I gather my own data. I gather data by giving 3 or 4 practice exams before the AP exam, so I know who my 2-3 borderlines are. I can identify them, and I share with them the statistic that if you complete the activities I ask you to complete, there's an 80% better or better chance, 80% chance or better of you passing the AP exam if you complete the review test and the FRQs I've asked you to complete. So understanding your own data is very, very important because you can implement strategies, you know when to implement them, you know how to use them, and it basically will help you grow as a professional and help you with student performance. And one last point, which is this. We mentioned earlier, all of this data is irrelevant if you don't know how you define success. So you can define success. There's a lot of ways you can do that. You can define success yourself. You can speak with administration and find out what their goals are for you. And one of the things I like to do is take a look at the benchmarks, the school average, district average, state average, and national averages. I like to use those as benchmarks to determine where do we stack up. Again, you take a look at my AP Environmental Science pass rate, you see 58%, and you think 58%, that's an F, that's not that great. But then you dig a little deeper and find out the national average is somewhere around 50%. And then you realize that you've outperformed the state, the district, and the nation. And in that particular year, that particular case, I was #1 in the district with that pass rate. So having benchmarks definitely gives you a better idea of what success is. So that will determine, again, some people, if they don't take a look and understand the benchmarks, they may think something is not performing as well as it is. And that's, again, another piece of data you need is when I'm talking to people and I say I have a 57 or 58% pass rate, you can see them roll their eyes. And then when you explain to them that the national average is 50%, that puts it back in perspective. And when you can tell them you were #1 in the district, that really puts it in perspective. So, and I had to do that once with an assistant principal where she called me in. She goes, "What's going on with AP Environmental Science?" And I was like, "You need to understand that here's the national average. This is where we rank in the district. And as an assistant principal, you need to understand the statistics better versus comparing us to other subject matters where they have different pass rates." So again, that's another reason you need to know your statistics and the statistics for your subject matter and your grade level. Okay, anybody can collect their own data. Analyzing it is a different story. So the important thing is that you collect baseline data. And then if you're not good at crunching data and using numbers, you have plenty of people on campus that are. Usually principals are flat out awesome at analyzing data. And if you have a comfortable relationship with your principal, you can sit down with him or her and analyze it that way. Assistant principals, some of them are good, some not so much. I've come across both. Your math and science teachers obviously are great at crunching data. We live by data. So you can always reach out to somebody who's a math or science teacher. And then here's the surprising one that will surprise a lot of people. Remember I told you I was a complete data geek? That's because I'm a coach and I'm a science teacher. But your coaches, your good coaches, they're usually outstanding at analyzing data and crunching numbers. So you can always reach out to a coach and say, "Hey, do you have a little bit of time where we can sit down and analyze the data?" I hope this helps. Hope I've given you some good ideas. Definitely know your numbers. And by knowing your numbers, especially with specific activities, what specific activities have as far as impact on pass rate, it allows you to figure out what to focus on, when to implement it, and gives you just a lot more strategy as far as preparation for state testing. You guys are awesome. Keep being heroes. Thanks for your time. Cole out.